Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Well, today is just a little quick video about a comparison with a JDM Seiko watch that I currently own and the Seiko SARB033 that I used to own. Now, I owned that SARB033 for a couple of years. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I understand why there is some hype about it, but I ended up selling it. And there was a few reasons I sold it, and I'm still comfortable that I did sell it. However, now that I've bought this watch, I certainly feel that there is some vibes that are similar between this one and the 033, and I thought I just might talk about the sort of similarities and differences between them, and why possibly it might be worthwhile picking one of these ones up if you're sort of in the market for a SARB033 and you don't want to spend that sort of money or those sort of inflated values of that particular watch. So I'm going to flip the camera around. I'm going to talk about this watch in hand, and I'm going to put some pictures of the SARB033. Yes, I don't have it in hand to put it side by side, but trust me, I've owned it for a couple of years. In the past, I have a good understanding of that watch, and I'll do my best sort of on screen to show you those similarities and differences between the two. Now guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please just tap on that subscribe button. It is the quickest and easiest way for you to support me and the channel, and I really do appreciate it. If you guys own this watch or possibly the SARB as well, I'd love to hear a comment from you down below. Also, if you're thinking about a SARB, do you think this is actually a worthwhile alternative? What are your thoughts? Alright guys, let's flip the camera around, let's check out this watch in more detail and have a bit of a discussion about these two Seikos. Right, let's flip the camera around. So here we have my Seiko SZSB012, and we're going to be putting it side by side today with a watch that I used to own, a watch that I don't have in my collection at the moment, unfortunately, to put them physically side by side, but I'm going to put a picture or some footage of the SARB033 on the left here. So what really are the big differences between them? And the reason we're asking the differences is because they are being sort of spoken about as similar watches, or at least this is being sort of spoken about as a replacement, or at least an option to own rather than the Seiko SARB. Firstly, the price. There is a big difference in prices, especially since the SARB was discontinued. This one here I bought for under 400 Australian dollars. It does range in prices depending on where you buy it, but you can quite consistently buy it for around 400 Australian dollars. The SARB, however, on the used market, well, the cheapest I could find in my searches was around 800 Australian dollars. So for a used watch, double the price of this Seiko. So for half the price and getting it new, what are we getting in hand? Well, we're getting slightly different dimensions, and I have to admit I prefer the dimensions of this Seiko. It sort of sits a little bit better on my wrist, for me anyway, my sort of personal opinions of watches on wrist. The case on this watch is 39.5 millimeters, whereas the SARB is 38 millimeters. This is a little bit thicker at 13 millimeters, whereas the SARB is 11 millimeters. Lug to lug, a little bit bigger on this one too, 47.5 millimeters, versus the lug to lug on the SARB is 44 millimeters. Both have a 20 millimeter lug width. Strangely enough, this one here, being a bigger watch, actually weighs less than the SARB. It is 121 grams versus the SARB being 136 grams. Now visually there are some differences as well, and there's some fairly obvious differences. The SARB has that step down case, whereas this one does not. It just has a normal more traditional style case. That SARB sort of step down is particularly nice, so it is a bit of a feature of the SARB. This one here obviously does not have a needle second hand. They both have fairly similar hands overall, however. The SARB also has solid end links, whereas this has hollow end links, and there's a differences in the movement of these watches. This one contains the 4R35 and the SARB contains the 6R15. So what does that mean for these two watches, and should you start considering buying a used Seiko SARB033 at the inflated price, or should you possibly consider this SZSB012? Well, it is going to depend on your budget, and it is going to depend on what you like out of a watch. But what I can say, having this watch in wrist and having owned the SARB033 for a couple of years, is I probably prefer this on wrist. I like the size of it. I prefer the movement. I feel a little bit more confident in it because that SARB movement did have a few little niggles occasionally. I never personally had any issues with the movement, but it is known to have a few little sort of critters in the background there that might cause you problems. And I certainly do appreciate the price of this one much more than the SARB. However, the SARB certainly had a few features that I particularly loved. The needle secondhand, beautiful little feature, which would have looked fantastic on this watch. And that step down to the case. What a beautiful feature on a lovely looking watch. Yes, solid end lugs, not too worried about that. Bracelets were similar sort of quality. Clasps were fairly similar sort of quality as well. Overall, obviously, it's going to depend on what you want to spend on a watch if you are considering one or the other. But I think value for money, this watch is going to be much better for you. But if you need to scratch that itch of the Seiko SARB033, well, maybe you're going to have to pay up for that. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. I know this is a little bit of a weird comparison since I only had one watch in hand, but I thought it was a very interesting thing to talk about because it has been mentioned many times about the similarities between the two watches. As always, I do appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.